Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Scoot Space podcast. Today I'm joined by Sam and Dave as we attempt to essentially draw the comparisons between the military world and the civil world, but with a bit of an angle on it. So what do I mean by that? Essentially, the military ethos, land and the sea, and then military domains. Do they transfer across the civilian world? Do they not? Let's have a go at trying to sort of draw them links over the next half an hour. But yes, before we get into it, I'll let the gents sort of give a bit of an introduction to themselves. So, Dave, I'll come to you first. You just let the audience know a little bit about yourself. That's okay.
Yep. So I'm Dave Taylor. I started my career many years ago now, well over 20 years ago, in cyber. So I joined the Royal Navy straight from school at 16. I did just over 10 years in the submarine service, most of the time on Britain's nuclear deterrent, so nuclear missiles going away, hiding, that kind of stuff. Since then, I've worked in different jobs in cyber, so I've managed internal teams, I've built numerous security operations centres, and now I'm the founder and managing director of Aruga Cyber, who are a managed security services provider.
Okay, perfect, Dave. Sam?
Yeah, hi, my name's Sam Wheeler. I'm currently the head of security operations at the Student Loans Company. My career in cyber started similar to yourself, Dave. I joined the Army, the British Army, to do signals intelligence at the age of 17. Straight out of school, ended up leaving the armed forces with an injury, unfortunately, medically discharged, and went and studied in university after that, ethical hacking up at Abertay in Dundee. And from there, ended up doing cybersecurity consulting for various businesses, helped build security operations centres for defence contractors, and ended up going to SOC management, and from SOC management in an MSSP, similar to yourself, ended up where I am now.
Okay, perfect. So, I know we'll sort of get into it over the next half an hour in terms of both more sort of in particular experiences in both your military experiences and the civilian world. So how this is going to work essentially is I'm going to throw the chaps some scenarios and we're going to see if, that does translate to the civilian world, or no, that's completely separate and we're just chatting nonsense more than anything. But so we'll see where we get to it. So I suppose the first place to go then is the command structure. I want to kind of go in. I always start these podcasts a little bit of a helicopter overview, and then we'll get more and more specific as we go through. So like I say, the command structure. Military, it's very, very disciplined, it's very, very regimented, and everyone sort of knows the role, and you take orders from above and you give orders down below, and you work as a team at that level. You don't really speak out of turn. Civilian world, I speak to a lot of people, and a lot of people from the military get quite shocked when they come to the commercial world when you get sort of a subordinate sort of speak out of turn to you, and then also you don't really want to ask for help from above as well, because it's like, they're too busy for me. So Dave, I'll come to you first on this one. The command structure, is it very, very different between the two worlds, and what's your how did you sort of move across and again sort of treat your managers?
I'll probably open it with the worst answer possible and say it's the same but different.
Okay.
So I think everywhere needs a command structure, and you're right, in the military it is very, very regimented, and it's like that for a reason. Obviously you're off on doing missions, you need to get the job done, you're in very, very high pressure environments, and without that command structure and that respect between the ranks, then stuff just wouldn't get done. In civilian life, again, you need a command structure, but obviously it's a lot more relaxed. There's a lot more collaboration, I would say. I think when I left, it was a hard transition, actually, because you come into... I remember in my first job, like, you would just start and you're very much in that regimented mode. Like, you just want to do exactly what you've been told to do, get it done as fast as possible. And it takes a while to get out of that. Yeah. But I think now I've managed teams both in the military and out of the military. And we're a veteran-founded business, so my business partner Dan and co-founder, he's ex-Army, he's ex-Signals. So we kind of manage it the same as what we were in the military, but it's a lot more relaxed, and people love it. Like, the guys love it. Stuff just gets done. Everywhere that I've ever worked, really, we really like the way you come across, because you just get stuff done. And that's I think that is the whole military mindset. So going back to what I said at the start, it's the same but different, but for good reasons.
Yeah. Sam, what's your thoughts on that?
I'd agree. I think veterans moving from life in the forces over to Civvy Cyber, it's not really a leap. It's a bit of a continuation.
Yes.
Because cyber in general, which we'll get into later, I imagine, like crossing all of these different domains, is a team sport.
Yep.
You know, you all rely upon each other. The only thing that stops a controlled incident from becoming a catastrophe is structure and discipline and paths of escalation, which replace the chain of command in the military. I mean, that chain of command still exists. You've still got your SOC manager reporting up to a CISO, and then you've got your levels of analysts going down. It's a similar kind of thing, where the one hovers over the other. But that kind of structure and those SOPs that you drill into analysts is exactly the same as drills and exercises that you do in the field. It's exactly the same. It's like the principles that you apply in cyber have, a lot of them, been adapted from the military.
Yep.
So I think that's why veterans and ex-forces people get on so well and are naturally kind of drawn towards cyber, because by its very nature, it's adversarial. You know, it's us versus them. Veterans don't want a job. They want a purpose.
Yes.
And cyber is kind of gives that mission. It's mission mindset. We got to defend this thing, you know, we got to do this thing, and this is our team, and this is how we're going to do it, you know, and all those elements of the military, intelligence, operations, command, all feed into this bigger cyber picture. So it's a very familiar experience for veterans. But then there is that element of, well, you're a civvy now. You can't just grab people by a chin strap and thrash them when they do something wrong. You know, like you can't do that. So that's probably the harder bit. It's more the social element, I think, for veterans. But professionally, I think it's very, very similar.
Yeah, I think you've answered that very, very well. And I've often thought, especially when I first got into cyber as a civvy, you're right. There's lots of veterans in there, and people want to get into it. And I always wondered, why is that?
Yeah.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It's adversarial, isn't it? It's a bit like being back in the military. It's like good guys versus bad guys, like you're doing a job. But even like what you mentioned about the hierarchy in terms of rank structure or whatever it is, that's massively important. But you bang on where you say about your SOPs, particularly in a SOC environment. You have playbooks for everything. Like, I need structure to everything that we're doing in our SOC. There's a process for absolutely everything, and everybody knows what it is, and you've got to rehearse that. Because like when you're in the military, like when we would be away on a submarine for months at a time underwater, stuff always goes wrong, and it can go wrong very, very quickly. The only reason you get out of those situations unscathed is because you've rehearsed it 1,000 times. And even then, the plan never is the plan. Like, stuff always changes, but there's structure to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you answered that very well and agree with everything that you said.
Really, really, yeah, I'll echo that. That was terrific points made by you both, gents. And yeah, that adversarial sort of theme that you've got going on, I haven't actually thought about it at that detail until you mentioned it. But yeah, that's why there is a logical step moving over from the mill into cyber, because even, you know, I've done pods very, very recently with a lot of the sort of CTI guys who were like, I didn't really, cyber was never at the forefront of my mind, and even though they were in intelligence, they'd never thought of cyber intelligence, and they was like, oh, when I left, I looked at cyber intelligence, seen there was a lot of crossover, and I thought, yeah. And that crossover is what you're both saying in terms of it's us against them, it's preparing to complete a mission, and that's what gives you its purpose, and that's why he's joined the military from a young age, and that's why the career lends it well. So I suppose that sort of gives a justification as to what we're all speaking about today, because there is sort of a lot of crossover between military and civilian. So this is where it'll get a little bit tricky. So let's see where we can get to it. So obviously this us against them, this mission, the SOC teams, boots on the ground, it very much is, they are sort of on the day to day dealing with every bit of noise. They do literally look at your level 1 with the tickets. It can be a little bit of crowd control. It can be a little bit of like, okay, that's a threat, that's not a threat. And they are at the forefront. They are in the trenches. Would you say that the SOC is kind of like them in the army, where it is, you know, just making sure, keeping the peace, shall we say? We'll obviously move around and get into threat intelligence, instant response, and beyond in a little bit. But what's your thoughts on the SOC, and how does it relate to the army? Sam, I'll come to you first, mate.
Yeah. So I would agree that your SOC analysts, they're your front line. Yep. They are the people that see it first. However, they also provide the bigger picture. So the SOC acts as a brain. They're at the middle of everything. So you've got your analysts on the forefront dealing with the threat that's coming onto the network. You've got, like you said, CTI is feeding them. So what they know is good, bad, ugly, whatever, that's being given to them through an intelligence life cycle by CTI people.
Yeah.
They're then testing their own defenses using things like red teaming, pen testing, breach and attack simulation, all these various methods of validating what they're doing is right and that there's no gaps. Because moving into the field on ops, for example, if you've got a weak perimeter or you've got a sign of weakness, it's going to be tested and it's going to be probed. It's going to be, you're going to have reconnaissance against you. That's where your threat actors, they're using Nmap scans, they're scanning networks and things like that. Infantry are designed to take and hold ground. That's what they do. And SOC analysts do that in the SOC. They are holding your ground. And that ground is your network.
Yep.
Like that perimeter, the border, your endpoints. That's where the SOC have their eyes looking for any sign of any anomalies, anything that's not right. They're your security patrols going out, looking around. It's the same kind of concept. And then if something does happen, that's obviously when you escalate into incident response.
Yep.
That's where you're deploying QRFs, quick reaction forces, or your IR teams, digital forensics, threat intelligence. Let's pull all these assets in and start coordinating a battle plan to deal with the threat that's in front of us.
Absolutely. Agree?
I do agree, but I could probably answer it slightly different because we've obviously had very different experiences. So when you said, is a SOC analyst like someone in the infantry? I've never been in the infantry, but from what I've seen in the army, I would say maybe not, but you've probably changed my mind a little bit there with how you answered that, because I always thought an infantry would be an aggressor, like you're going out, you're being loud, you're being seen, you're doing stuff. If I was to answer it a little bit differently based on my experiences, and I was thinking about this as you were answering, you could really think of a submarine itself as a SOC.
Okay.
And if you think of the guys, like if you've ever seen it on a film or whatever, and you have the sonar guys who are sat at the panels looking at stuff with their earphones in, constantly listening for threats, that would be a SOC analyst. They're there detecting stuff, they're analysing everything that they hear. Once they find a threat, they're seeing how far it is, how bad is it, risk like analysis around it. And then that gets passed up to other teams. So we'd then go to like a tactical specialist who's like, okay, that is a threat, what we're going to do. Then it would go to, say, weapons, if you're going to neutralise the threat. So that could be like containment with torpedoes and that kind of stuff. So if you think about the logical way a threat is handled in a submarine, it is a little bit like a SOC, I suppose.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it, obviously, from the Navy point of view as well. So that's quite interesting. And yeah, let's naturally go along the progression of that then. So we sort of touched on it in terms of, we'll go to the escalation in a second, but obviously these SOC teams, they get fed this information from, I will say, for the sake of a scenario, from up above, and that could be, like you say, let's use it as that triage of the military, and let's just say it's the RAF just for the sake of it, but I'm only playing the game here. And they are the intelligence, they are the Overwatch, and it is the CTI teams, and they essentially are providing all this information to these SOC teams about, like, cool, this noise is out there, but don't worry about it yet. Okay, this is actually getting a little bit more serious now. These creds have gone out onto the dark web. This brand issue has happened. Executives are getting hit. All this sort of intelligence where the SOCs then need to act on it. Can be a little bit like the RAF. They are scouring the skies, and they are essentially going border to border on a global scale and checking all the threats from down below. So Dave, I'll come to you first. CTI teams, is there any correlation can you see between how the military operates to the civilian world?
Well, loads, absolutely loads. Like everything the military does is based on intelligence. Like you wouldn't go anywhere unless you knew what the intelligence on the ground was. You put yourself in a bad situation if you do.
Yeah.
But each arm of the armed forces, so we were chatting before the pod, obviously, of like I'm Navy, your Army. We have our own threat intel teams. So you've got your own people on the ground gathering intel, looking at satellite images, listening into phone conversations, all that kind of stuff. So that's bigger picture. But going back to the submarine again, even in like an isolated environment, like when we used to go out, say if you're on a submarine with nuclear missiles on board or the Trident missiles, your main objective is to just go out and hide. Nobody in the world knows where you are apart from a select few people on that submarine. So you've got threat intel coming in all the time with like different threats, global threats that could come to you in your area, and you're constantly passing it on to the teams on board and working out what's good, what's bad, what do we need to be concerned about. So threat intel is massive for the armed forces, but it kind of starts off really, really big, but then it gets more granular and granular depending on what you're doing. And I suppose that is exactly the same as a SOC. We've all got our own threat intel feeds that we plug into globally, so your OSINT feeds or your open source or your paid for subscriptions, that kind of stuff. But then for us, we're looking after customers in different industries, so we will tailor our threat intelligence specifically to that industry. So what are the attackers who are going after that industry right now? What tactics and techniques are they using right now? So we can build bespoke detections around for that. So kind of follows the same thing. It starts off really big, but it gets very granular and bespoke and mission critical.
Yep, absolutely. Sam?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Obviously, in your kind of scenario of being, I'm not very experienced with the deterrent, but it's an isolated asset. Compared to my world where you needed communications to your left, right, up, down all the time. Like it was just constant feeds of information. Whereas something as I'm going to say as quiet as the deterrent that needed to be isolated, don't know where it is, and protected. It had to be self-sustaining. Very much, for example, like if you look at the way that Royal Marine Commandos are shifting now as this future commando force, they need to be self-sufficient. They can't, rely on assets around them. But my world, you could. And if to kind of draw comparisons to the RAF, like you were saying, aviation obviously was first introduced to the military, and it gave them an unprecedented view of the battlefield. You could get that high vantage point, and from the First World War, look at trench layouts, trench networks. Into the Second World War, air dominance over the Channel was a massive point of contention. And even nowadays, air superiority is king. If you look at the conflict in Ukraine, neither side has air superiority, and therefore you don't see decisive moves happening on either side, and it's kind of ground into a bit of a stalemate now. So having that unprecedented view of the battlefield in cyber terms is dominance in the information space. And that dominance comes from intelligence. If you know what's coming, if you can see over the next hill, if you can see over the horizon and see what the threats coming down the line using things like CTI teams from your threat intelligence feeds and putting them into the tip or wherever, it allows your SOC teams and it allows your analysts to be pre-informed, and it kind of pivots into that proactive mindset rather than a reactive mindset. If I'm reacting to what I'm seeing, I haven't got initiative. And in the military and in cyber, you want initiative. You want to be dictating the terms of the battle, not your enemy. And that's very difficult to achieve in cyber. I mean, we'll probably get into it a little bit later, but the presence of that intelligence allows you to make informed strategic decisions before something terrible happens. And then it does get a bit cagey depending on your industry, but sharing that intelligence is also critical. I know some industries, some companies like to hoard their intelligence, like dragons hoard, and keep all my gold to myself. This is almost secret, super secret intelligence. But industries, especially like in finance, banks often share intelligence with each other, even though they're a directly competing company. But the industry as a whole benefits from that intelligence sharing. So that's quite critical, and that overwatch over the industry kind of relates to the Air Force, I suppose.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And really well answered again, chaps. And just to echo that, like you say, intelligence is a currency at the end of the day. There is information and there is intelligence. Information is when it is out there and it's loud and it's all a bit irrelevant. Yes, there's threats going on. We all know there's threats going on, but it's not urgent. It's important, but it's not urgent. And it's that metric that you've got to sort of decide where it is. And then obviously when it is intelligence, it's like a little bit closer to home, you've got to be aware of it. But obviously we're in this digital age now where cyber is now playing a part on the battlefield now, and wars are happening in boardrooms. These decisions are happening on this geopolitical landscape, and even more so why threat intelligence is important is because of like the amount of misinformation that's out there at the moment as well, which further dilutes but also increases the need for solid CTI feeds at the end of the day, because it's like, okay, there's a lot of information out there, and a lot because of this AI boom. It's like, what's actually real now? And there's like these deep fakes that are happening. We're like, I think even Trump got questioned once where he was like, did I say that? And to be honest with you, it's hard because he says a lot of things, and it's like, did he? But I think there was it hit the news where he was like, oh no, this was actually a deep fake. But the power that can then have can incite a lot of dangerous things, which again segues very nicely to, let's discuss a little bit about incident response. And I suppose we can kind of use the analogy of the Marines, should we say, and let's just say, cool, this intelligence we've moved through the intelligence now, and this is like there's a serious incident that's happened now, whether it be, like you say, like hostage taking or whatever it might be. There is a mission where lives are at stake and it's important, and we need to go above the SOC now, and as you mentioned, we need to get in sort of like special forces, and like we're at QTF, did you say?
QRF, quick reaction force.
So I'm not the military one here, and we need to sort of escalate this, and this is where we're escalating it to an instant response team now. So Dave, I'll come to you first. Yep. Instant response teams, Marines, like, do you know where I'm going with this?
Absolutely,
and what's your sort of thoughts?
I completely agree with it, to be fair. So even in what we do in our SOC, we do instant response to a point. So if we detect some kind of malicious activity, we will contain things. So we'll disable user accounts, we'll revoke sessions, we'll isolate devices from the network, that kind of stuff. If things go a step further than that, and the whole business has been ransomware, or they need that extra level of support, I suppose it's a hostage situation, isn't it? Exactly the same, but digital. You would bring in the specialists. So you're going to bring in the special forces, or you're going to bring in a specialist incident response team. And you're going to do that because you can't have all the skills. Like, you can do stuff to a point, but you really need experts in the right places at the right time to get the job done. So that's where they would come in. If you think like digital forensics, highly specialised, like we don't know that. We're never going to get trained up in that. So I think it's a perfect analogy with how the military will bring specialist units in to do specialist jobs, but that's backed up by everybody else. So threat intelligence and all of that stuff. So if we bring in an instant response team to deal with a major incident, the SOC has already got all of that intel. We've already got everything laid out. As soon as they come on scene, we can hand them all the information, saying, right, this happened on this date. This is what you need to be looking for. This is where it came in. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So they're not coming in cold. They're coming in to do the job fast and get it done.
That's it, and it's like it is this team sport, which goes back to the start about the mindset of why people want to move over from MIL to the cyber world, and because it is mission driven, and it is exactly what you said. Like the threat intel team might have been profiling a person of interest for months and months and months, and because they know that he's going to elicit some dangerous activity, and then like you say, the SOC team might have been on the streets gathering more information and just making sure that he's not doing anything right now. But then if said incident happens, bang, that's when you call in the special forces or the IR team, who might only be there for look at how often IR teams actually there. They're there to clean up the mess, and then once they're out of there, then they've done their job, they've retrieved the digital artifacts, and they move on. Their lifespan isn't actually as long as what the threat intelligence life cycle might be, because that's, like you say, their skill set is needed for that particular time, and it reflects the severity of the situation, which is why it's the whole triad is important, and how they all play a part. Sam, I came in there, and sorry if I brought something from your mouth there. So what's your thoughts on that?
There's not too much more to add on top of that. It depends kind of on the service that you kind of use. I know a lot of different businesses like having DFIR, digital forensics and incident response retainers. So they've got people there that they can just hit the button whenever something happens. It's like being on the rapid reaction force, 24 hours notice to move. Bergen's packed at the end of your bed, ready to go. 16 air assault brigade, that kind of thing. But if you have a DFIR retainer, it's almost like an insurance policy that you can call on someone when things go bad, because you're not going to retain all of those skills and all of that knowledge, very specialist skills, in-house most of the time. Some places do. But when you call these guys in, they can be on site very quickly. They'll pre-prep for an engagement. You'll have your cyber incident response plans. You'll have all of your playbooks. For example, they'll tell you if this particular thing happens, don't shut this down or reboot that. You've got to think about preservation of evidence as well, because if the cache is wiped on a machine, they might not be able to recover some important information that could have led to, oh, well, this is where you were breached, this is where it happened, or this is the command and control infrastructure that this threat actor's speaking to. For whatever reason, they might miss details. So it's important for the SOC analysts to be informed about what will happen when those specialist teams arrive, and what they're going to do, whether it be a forensic collection, and they'll take that away and analyze it for, could be weeks, depending on the breach. And they'll often then follow up with your aftercare, if you want to put it that way, because, recovery from incidents can take months, sometimes years, depending on what the severity of that breach is, the size of your organization, the complexity. The recovery process could take a long time after, a team's come in, done a smash and grab, but what's the fallout of that afterwards? Like, not to get too political, but the campaigns, in the Middle East, if we've gone in and removed bad actors, but those people were holding power of some kind, we've now created a vacuum, of power, and now we're going to have to fix that and aftercare that so that stability can return to the region. It's exactly the same when recovering from a cyber incident. If you just whip all this stuff out and start pulling the plug out of everything, it could actually probably do more damage than good, depending on the situation. So it requires a lot of thought and assessment from these specialist teams.
I think that goes back to what we said like 2 questions in as well, about when we mentioned playbooks and SOPs, and you've just got to rehearse everything, every scenario. You don't have to do it to the nth degree, but be familiar with everything. So if you do have an IR team and they're on a retainer, they will have a pack of each customer and what's their environment like, all that kind of, what's the incident response plan. And there's a thing in the military, which you probably heard of, about you don't have to be a specialist or be very good at everything, just do the basics very well, and that's what elevates you and takes you to the next level. So it's exactly the same in cyber, in your SOC or whatever. Just do the basics well, rehearse, plan, have a plan for if the plan fails, that kind of stuff. That's where it's very, very similar to the military.
There is a method to this madness, and I've been so impressed with both of you chaps in terms of being able to stitch this all together, honestly. Just a couple more concepts, because we've absolutely raced through this, but I really do want to get both your thoughts on this. And the first of which is the leadership now, in terms of the CISOs, the heads of, the founders. The way I perceive it as a non-military guy is they take a bit of a backseat. They're a bit more strategic. They don't get their hands dirty. I'm saying this all very naively. I'm doing it to set a scene, and they are away from the trenches, and they are the ones behind the screen with the mic on, and they are just pulling the strings, and they are dictating everything. I say that because I've watched one too many films, and I know that it's not always like that, and they have got the battle scars to prove it. But Dave, what's your thoughts on sort of leadership, and is it the same when you're in the military in terms of cyber? And basically, are they rolling up their sleeves, or are they just pulling the strings?
I'd probably say this is the only area where I would say it could really differ, but again, it's like depends on scenario and industry. Like, it can be so varied. But in the military, and it depends, like you've got guys who join in like I did at 16, you're at the bottom, you work your way up, and you've got guys who fly all the way up through the ranks and end up very, very senior. But even like people who would join as, say, a commissioned officer or whatever, they're still on the ground with the guys at the start. They're still getting the battle scars, because you can't lead from the front if you've never been behind before. Do you know what I mean? Whereas in cyber, it's not necessarily like that. You get some people who have got no experience, but then they come in because it's more of a business environment. So you've got a business head-on rather than a mission-critical head-on. Am I answering that right? Like, do you know what I mean? Where I'm going with that?
Yeah, so, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to work under leadership, senior leadership, CISOs, and many of them have been ex-forces as well. So I'm very fortunate in that space. A previous manager of mine spent 30 odd years in a police in Northern Ireland. So closest, damn it, you know. So that it was very controlled environment, and they understood, and a lot of them did come through the ranks. They started as analysts and things like that, but there is those organizations out there that these leaders are going to come in from externally. They're going to go get their degree in business management or whatever it may be. They might do a master's in cybersecurity for a year or whatever it may be, or they're from a board or a leadership position in another organization, and they cross deck into cyber, into your organization. And I think signs of a good leader, which might not always come from civvy leadership, is understanding what your team do. I know I can't do it, and I know in the military we've got a big ethos of every man a leader, you know, of if I was put in the position, I need to lead the guys around me, and I have the autonomy and the know-how to make a decision. You know, if I'm encounter a difficult scenario, like in an incident response scenario. But not all civilian companies think that way. And in corporate world, you do get a lot of people, we call it empire building, where they will gain all these bits of knowledge and these teams, and they're like, well, this is my bit, and you're not going to touch it, and I'm holding all the knowledge. But a good leader doesn't necessarily do that. They try and learn from the teams and say, well, I may not be able to lead by example because I haven't done what you've done, but I want to be able to understand what you do so that I can help you, or I can give you the resources, or I can give you the support that you require to do your job effectively and efficiently. Because ultimately, in civvy world, if your team does well, it makes you look good. You know, that's not necessarily a mindset that you get a lot in the military. Well, it can happen, but because you're all in it together, you know, your junior officers come in and they spend time at the front before they start progressing to senior leadership. But it's not always the case in Civvy Street. And that would be a telltale sign of a good leader, is do they want to get involved? Yeah, they may be sitting back, being strategic and dealing with the bureaucracy and the red tape of executives, but they are the linchpin between the trenches and what's happening operationally and tactically, all the way up to the strategic level, and they are the filter that goes through. They should be the umbrella that shields those poor guys in the trenches from what's coming on from on top. But at the same time, they need to understand what those guys are doing so they can communicate the success and the effort that's going into protecting the organization upwards to the executive.
The empire building was a really good analogy, because right at the start, when we were saying about rank structure and how things are rigid and whatever, in the military you spend a lot of time with each other. So no matter what unit you're in, even if you don't like each other, you know each other inside out. So when something happens, you just get it done. And it doesn't really matter like what job you've done. As you're moving up through the ranks, you start looking after other people, might be in different units or a different branch of the military that you're not familiar with, but you've still got that kind of the structure and the training that you've had about communication and how the rank structure works and how you deal with people and how you get the job done. That no matter where you are in the military, you've been through that training, and everybody's got it. Whereas civilian world is completely different. Like it's so varied. Different companies operate completely different to other people. Some are dead relaxed, some aren't. Some people have just come through uni, but they can talk well, so they got themselves into a job, but they got no experience. So it's like, that's why I said it's the only question I think we've had where there's a clear difference between the military and civilian life.
Absolutely. And chaps, I just want to ask you this one last question, and it's what we was discussing actually, Dave, before the pod, and it's about sort of, I'm going to label this as the cross-pollination of skills, and the military world is really good at rotating you, aren't they? They can so I perceive that you can essentially work in one role and then get moved to another one if you so see fit. You can stay if you want, but it's very easy to move around. In civilian world, not so much. You might need to do another certification to move over, and it's a bit more linear. It's a bit like, well, you've decided to go this path. If you want to start again, you need to drop out and go to university or do a reskilling course. It's a lot bigger of a decision. So yeah, Dave, I will come to you first. Like, I suppose this is more of a a gold star for the military in my eyes is the fact that the cross pollination of skills surely is better for the workforce as a result compared to civilian world. Or am I missing something?
No, you're absolutely right. And God, you could go down 100 avenues with this question, I think. So one thing that definitely answers that question, and this definitely is a Navy thing, it's probably an Army thing as well, but if you think of like a ship or a submarine that's out at sea, you've all got your main job. So I was a communicator, that was my main thing. So doing cyber, IT, communications, that was my main role. But on a submarine, there's only a certain amount of people, and if you're hiding in the middle of the Atlantic somewhere and there's a fire, you're not phoning 999. If someone dies, you're not phoning 999. Everybody's got to know how to do everything. So you're a trained firefighter, you're trained in like search and rescue, you're trained in first aid. Like if anything goes wrong, I mean, as a submariner, you wear dolphins. That's your sign of being a submariner. A bit like the Marines have got the green beret and that kind of stuff. Yeah. You only get those dolphins once you've been to sea for a certain amount of time, and they've took you around every part of the boat and said, right, that pipe's burst. What are you going to do? How do you isolate that? So not only are you a communicator, firefighter, first aider, you know how to do mechanics and like things like that, because you've got to, otherwise you could go very, very wrong. Yeah. But one thing I always thought about the military and what I always really liked about it, it was good and it was bad actually at the same time, is you spend a lot of time with people on a unit, you become best friends, you had like a cracking laugh, it's absolutely brilliant, and all of a sudden you're drafted to another unit, and then it's just a weird thing in the military where you don't think about them again, you don't really see them again, and then you go and make new mates who are now your best mates, and it's just the weirdest thing. But then you could see that first person 10 years later and you pick up like you've never not seen each other. It's the most bizarre thing. But civil life definitely doesn't have that. It's very much a, oh, I'm not doing that, or can I get trained in this? And it's just a completely different environment. But yeah,
the Army has a similar ethos. It's before everybody goes and does, we call them trades. So I did electronic warfare as my trade, but you've got artillery gunners, mechanics, drone operators, like so many varied roles. Like they say if there's a role in Civvy Street, you can do it in the Army. Like it's so wide. But there's this underlying ethos, which is you're a soldier first before you trade. And when you go and do your phase 1 training, it's only 3 months long. But that is where everything's embedded in you to be an infantry soldier. If you're a chef and you're happy cooking away, and then suddenly your forward operating base is under attack by enemy forces, and there's, the enemy's at the gates, you're going to be asked to pick up a weapon, and so your marksmanship principles, your camouflage and concealment, all those fighting skills and those core soldiering skills are embedded across every single person within the Army. And then you get a specialism on top of that. Very similar in cyber, and it goes back to what you were saying around the brilliant basics. If you are a cyber analyst, it doesn't matter what type of analyst, a cyber analyst, if you can do cyber skills well, those basic core skills, you'll be able to pivot and flex and go, all right, well, I understand what threat intelligence is for. So I'm going to go do a bit of threat intelligence and learn a bit in that space. Okay, go back. Okay, I want to now go to level 2, level 3 senior SOC analysts. Okay, I don't want to do that. I want to now go look at pen testing or vulnerability management. So there's all of these different avenues of cyber. But if you start in the trenches as a SOC analyst, which is where most people start their cyber careers, if they can master those basic skills, it shouldn't close doors for you later in your career. Which is probably the only kind of similarity or connection I could make there. But I know that especially at more junior levels as well, the industry is very dependent on certification. They're like, oh, well, you can't do this if you haven't got this cert. But speaking from my experience, I haven't done CISP, I haven't done CISM, I haven't done any of these big certs, yet I find myself in senior cyber management because I can do the do. It's actions speak a lot louder and your experience speaks a lot louder than this piece of paper. And if I had my time again, to be honest, I probably wouldn't have done a degree. I would have gone straight from the armed forces into cyber, but that opportunity at the time that I left was not there. There wasn't any kind of transition type courses and things like that I could have done. So my only avenue at that time was a degree, and every job you saw is you need a degree. But actually, really, do you? No. Like I'm looking at my team now, I put a lot higher value on the people and their persona, how they behave, and their attitude more than their actual skills. Because technical skills can be taught to anybody. You know, very much like these brilliant basics. You know, you can take anyone off the street and turn them into a sailor or a soldier if they've got the right attitude, you know, and they want to be there and they want to do the job. Yeah, you can get your fitness requirements done. Yeah, we can teach you how to shoot. We can teach you how to dig a trench. Those things can be taught. You know, it's attitude that makes a good analyst, and focus on a mission-driven kind of mindset, tasks at hand.
Could I just add to that a little bit by saying you absolutely do not need a degree to work in cybersecurity. It's like, I just don't get it when people say it. I think it's an old school way of thinking. I think that's definitely changing now. Going back to the certs point of view, that's highly conflicting depending on who you ask. So I absolutely agree that you don't need loads of certs to be good. Experience is better than anything, absolutely 100%. But I do a lot of talks, or I have done a lot of talks with like people who are at uni, want to get into cyber, or people who are breaking into cyber. I mean, I hate that term. Like, what does that even mean, breaking into cyber? You don't break into being a bus driver or something, do you? It's just really weird. But I've also done mentorship with veterans who are in the military who want to leave, and the conversations are very different that I have with them. The thing with veterans who want to leave, they really want it, and you tell them what they need to do and they will go and get it done, and they have done. Like, there's some brilliant success stories. But then going back to certs, for someone who wants to get a job in cyber, everybody wants those jobs, like the entry-level jobs. So as I'm sure you are now, someone who's hiring for those positions, the only way you can filter out all of those CVs and stuff that you get is, have they got the certs? Have they put the effort in? Do you know what I mean? It's the only way. You can't interview everybody. That's the only way you can get it done. And as you start moving through the ranks, you don't really need to look for that anymore. So yeah, I completely agree. But just want to add, you definitely don't need a degree for cyber. And what I do say to people as well is, when they want to transition into cyber, is, what does that mean? Like, what job do you want? Cybersecurity is the profession of professions. It's like a massive umbrella term for 100 different jobs. Some of them dead technical, some of them not technical. Like, what do you actually mean? What do you want to do? Because where you go is very, very different. And about doing the basic things very, very well is to be like working in a SOC analyst or a pen tester or anyone like that, or anyone who's in IT support that wants to move into cyber. A very good place to start is understanding how things are put together. You can't protect them if you don't know how they work. So networking, absolutely, get that done, and you have a real good standing. And that's when you can pivot and do like more specialist trades, a bit like the military. You do your basics first, and then you move on to more specialist roles. So yeah, bit of a rant, but
no, absolutely fantastic. And look, I'll finish on this. Is like, as a former recruiter, I can absolutely agree in the sense of like, we can do a whole other podcast on certifications and the gripe about them. Like, honestly, I've said it before, but I could sometimes see acronyms going off the person's CV, and then I'd speak to them, and then they just wouldn't be able to actually do it on the day, and that gets sort of seen out at interview stage as well. So I can absolutely sort of echo the point that the chaps have made about, don't worry about the certifications, get the basics done first. Don't get me wrong, there is some good ones out there, but we'll do this on another episode, otherwise we'll be here all day. But chaps, I've really enjoyed that. I just want to thank you both for your time, and if anybody has any questions or disagree or would like to bolt on any further sort of examples to what the chaps might have said today, I was sure to put Sam and Dave's information down below. And yeah, once again, thanks for coming on the Screw Space Podcast.
Thank you for having us. Cheers.